So it's all theater with these guys. Yesterday in the House Judiciary Committee, which is the one run by Jerry Nadler, right? And they had this hearing with a title. It even has a title, so I guess it makes it easier to turn it into a Netflix movie, Lessons from the Mueller Report. But they don't have any lessons from the Mueller report. Mueller exonerated Trump on charges of Russian collusion, after which anything he may have screamed, fire that man who will rid me of this turbulent priest, whatever he said, doesn't mean anything, right? Because he never did anything to stop the investigation. He cooperated with the investigation. They gave millions of documents. Everybody, Don McGahn, went and testified. So they got nothing, but they're trying to keep this narrative alive rather than say, oops, never mind, which is what they should say. So who do they bring to testify? John Dean. Now, for those of you who don't remember John Dean, all right, John Dean was the architect of the cover-up in Watergate, right? Not a hero. He's not a hero. He was the architect. He was the mastermind. What did the FBI called him? The master manipulator of the cover-up. To save his keister, he testified, and it was a big deal that Nixon's attorney went and testified, right? And because of that, he was convicted of only one felony. He dealt down to one felony. He was given a sentence of 1 to 4 years in prison, but in the end, he served that time by hanging out in the with the Democrats, basically, and testifying, and then that was his time served. So he was like 4 months time served, and he was let go. So he made a deal. Since then, he has been making a career out of accusing Republicans of being worse than Nixon. He wrote a whole book about George W. Bush, Worse Than Nixon. I don't remember the title, but it was something like that, right? So they bring him on to testify about this case about which he knows nothing, right? A complete dog and pony show. Matt Gaetz just took him apart. Let's play that clip.
Here we sit today in this hearing with the ghost of Christmas past because the chairman of the committee has gone to the Speaker of the House and sought permission to open an impeachment inquiry. But she has said no. And so instead of opening the impeachment inquiry into Donald Trump, which is what the chairman wants to do and what I presume a majority of Democrats want to do, we're here reopening the impeachment inquiry potentially into Richard Nixon, sort of playing out our own version of that 70s show. And what I really regret,
it is striking, Mr. Gaetz,
you're here as a prop. You are functionally here as a prop because they can't impeach President Trump because 70% of Democrats want something that 60% of Americans don't. So they're in this no-win situation, and you sit before us here with no knowledge of a single fact on the Mueller report, on a hearing entitled Lessons from the Mueller Report.
Mr. Gaetz, can I answer your question, please?
It's not your time, Mr. Dean. It's my time. So here's the deal, right? We have a false accusation against the President of the United States that he was an agent of Russia. My colleagues on the Democratic side made that accusation. And so where do we go from here?
I mean, that is devastating stuff. And then Steve Cohen, the Democrat congressman, he says this is why it had to be done. Let's cut to.
Well, it's not just a show, but for the part of it that it is a show, it's okay. The American public needs to be shown what was in the Mueller report. I think it's been said only 2% of the people read it, and I can understand that. It's not the most, it's not page-turner material. So the American public took what Barr gave them in his 3.5-page synopsis, claiming there was no collusion, and collusion's not even a legal term and was not in there.
It's like, my dad owns a House committee. Let's put on a show. You know, he's saying it's worth doing it because nobody read the Mueller report. If people had read the Mueller report, they would have said, wow, this president, boy, he really yells a lot and he says dopey things, but he doesn't do that much. They can see that. They can see that with their own eyes. They don't need to read the Mueller report. He was let off the hook for being a Russian spy, which is what they accused him of, treason. They said this on CNN again and again. They said it on NBC. You know, he committed treason. He was a Russian asset, as they like to put it. It didn't happen. And so they're just running this show with this, as Gaetz said, it's a problem. So why is all this allowed? Why is all this even covered? Why is all this not just laughed off of television? It's because Donald Trump is such a threat, a Hitlerian threat to the nation. Here's Hillary Clinton giving the case.
So when I read a book like Madeline's and you want to just jump up and yell at points like, why didn't more people speak out? You know, where were the leaders? Where were the business leaders and the academic leaders and the press leaders? And for a million different reasons in a lot of these settings, people were either not paying attention or they had the unfortunately, foolish idea that a Mussolini or a Hitler could be controlled. And so the demagoguery, the appeal to the crowd, the very clever use of symbols, the intimidation, verbal and physical intimidation, was overlooked. And this is a classic pattern. There is nothing new about it. It's just different means of messages being delivered. And I think given the rapidity with which information can be conveyed today because of the internet, it is an even more dangerous set of circumstances.
Now, the absurdity is strong in this one. She's comparing Trump to Hitler and Mussolini. She's comparing him to Hitler and saying, well, the appeal to the crowds, the clever use of symbols, the intimidation. Adolf Hitler came to power, I think it was 1933. He manipulated the parliamentary system in Germany, got himself in power legally, but with a lot of shenanigans, but legally. Within a year, Adolf Hitler had eliminated any other party except the Nazi Party. There were no more parties in Germany. He had gotten rid of trade unions. He had banned Jews from kinds of work and basically made them non-citizens, some of whom couldn't even get food in the towns in which they lived in. Where is any of that happening, right? He had the Night of the Long Knives. Within at least maybe a little over a year, the Night of the Long Knives, where 1,000 people were arrested and slaughtered because they were not what exactly the guys who brought Hitler to power, the SA, were not the guys he wanted to consolidate his power, the SS. So he just wiped them out and wiped out anybody who had opposed him. Where the hell is that happening? Donald Trump holds rallies, Hitler holds rallies, so Donald Trump is like Hitler. It would be nonsensical if it weren't for the fact that they are backed up by the press. And the press loves it because it makes them feel like heroes. You know, Jim Acosta, Jim Look at Me, I'm Jim Acosta, has a new book out. I believe it's called Look at Me, I'm Jim Acosta, by Look at Me, I'm Jim Acosta. And I think the case he's making is that we should look at him because he's Jim Acosta. Now, Jim Acosta is a clown. He sits there and he shouts things at the president. He tells the president what he thinks is, if that's news, nothing that Jim Acosta thinks is news, literally nothing that he thinks is news. But CNN, where Jim Acosta works, has his book, Look at Me, I'm Jim Acosta, and has him on the Brian Stelter show to talk about the terrible oppression of the press under Adolf Trump.
Do I have any regrets? You know, I wish at times that the press had been a bit more in solidarity with one another and standing up to this White House and saying, listen, the president can't call us the enemy of the people. We're not going to go along with that. And I think we've missed some opportunities here and there to challenge that. I will say one of the things that I'm most grateful for during this experience is how just about every news organization in Washington and here in New York stood behind us here at CNN when they took away my press pass.
Yeah,
that was a very important First Amendment case, and I talk about it in the book. Had the Trump administration won that case, Brian, it would have sent shockwaves through our industry. It would have put a real chilling effect on the First Amendment in this country. And people might say, oh, you're just puffing yourself up. You're higher in your own fumes. No, the Trump administration's own lawyers went into the courtroom and said that the president of the United States can throw out whoever he wants out of the White House.
This is a guy who manhandled a female aide because she was trying to take the mic away from him long after he had had his question and been, and they threw him out for rudeness, which I think they would have been able to do had they actually followed the case up and appealed, but they didn't want to make a big fuss out of it. Nobody wants to take on people who buy their ink by the barrel, as somebody once said. So this is the oppression. Now, if they were oppressed, right? I mean, he does not even making any sense because he's saying we wish we were in solidarity, but they stood behind him when he was thrown out. They don't want to stand behind him because he's a clown. Let's just take a look at this oppressed press that cannot speak because they're so afraid of the physical and mental intimidation wrought on them by Donald Trump. Here they are, recently Nancy Pelosi, basically trying to appease her base in Congress, was quoted as saying, I would like to see Donald Trump in jail. I'd like to see him in jail. And she was just showing how tough she was, so she doesn't actually have to go through with impeachment, which would probably cost them the 2020 election. So here's cut number 5, the press amplifying that.
Do you want to see the president in prison instead of impeaching him?
So what was your reaction when you heard Speaker Pelosi reportedly saying that she wants to see President Trump in prison?
But here's the question. Would you like to see President Trump in prison.
Do you think President Trump committed crimes that could be prosecuted?
He did.
When Nancy Pelosi says she wants to see the President of the United States in prison, is that at all realistic?
You know, I think it could be realistic.
No one is above the law, and that includes President Trump.
If it determines that we lead to impeachment or if he ends up in jail, so be it.
Now, Bob Mueller almost said that he should be in jail.
If you become president in 2020, would you want your Justice Department to pursue charges against President Trump?
Do you want to see President Trump in prison? Well, let me press you, Congressman. Do you want to see the President of the United States in jail?
More than anything else, Wolf, look, the lizard brain that I have says I hope bad things happen to this man.
Hey, man, if this is torture, chain me to the wall.
Really? I mean, if these guys were oppressed, how is it they're calling for the imprisonment of the president? I mean, how is it they call for impeachment every day? How is it, if they're oppressed, that they can just rattle off all these charges against Donald Trump and nothing ever happens? It is just an amazing. We're living under racial tyranny on Netflix, but not in real life. We have Watergate going on in Congress, but not in real life. We have oppression of the press in the press, but not in real life. They are using their domination of the media to create a fantasy world of oppression that simply does not exist.